Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The front door creaked open, and Luciano stepped into the foyer, the weight of a long day at the coin shop settling on his shoulders. He hung his brown tweed jacket on the coat rack, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Mara, I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing through the hallway. "In the kitchen," came the response, accompanied by the sizzle of something delicious on the stove. Luciano made his way to the kitchen, loosening his tie as he walked. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, making his stomach growl in anticipation. He found Mara standing at the stove, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, stirring a pot of what looked like pasta sauce. "How was your day at the bank?" Luciano asked, planting a kiss on her cheek. Mara turned, a tired smile on her face. She wore a crisp white blouse and navy pencil skirt, her work attire still impeccable despite the long hours. "Oh, you know, the usual. Mrs. Henderson came in complaining about her account again. I swear that woman finds a new issue every week." Luciano chuckled, reaching for the cabinet to set the table. "Sounds like my day. Old Mr. Fitzpatrick spent 2 hours debating the value of his Lincoln penny collection." They fell into their comfortable routine, Luciano setting the table while Mara finished cooking. Soon they were seated across from each other, plates steaming with pasta and rich tomato sauce. "Oh, before I forget," Luciano said, reaching into his pocket. "I've got something interesting to show you." Mara raised an eyebrow, fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Is this another rare coin? Because if it is, I swear, Luciano, our house is turning into a numismatic museum." Luciano laughed, shaking his head. No. Well, sort of. It's a coin, but not one for the collection." He placed a small golden coin on the table between them. It gleamed in the warm light of the dining room, its surface etched with intricate symbols neither of them recognized. Mara leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "Where did you get this?" "A friend brought it into the shop today. Said it was a family heirloom, passed down for generations." Luciano picked up the coin, turning it over in his fingers. "But here's the kicker. He claims it has the power to grant wishes." Mara snorted, taking a sip of her wine. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England. Did you check if he was running a fever?" I know, but he seemed dead serious about it." Luciano set the coin back down. "Said his great-grandfather used it to wish for wealth during the Great Depression, and suddenly struck gold in his backyard." "Well, if that's true, why didn't he just wish for more money instead of selling it to you?" Mara asked, her tone skeptical. Luciano shrugged. "Apparently, it only works once per person. After that, it's just a fancy paperweight." Mara reached out, picking up the coin and examining it closely. "It is beautiful, I'll give you that. But magical? Come on, Luciano. We're a bit old for fairy tales, don't you think? Hey, a man can dream, can't he?" Luciano grinned, twirling pasta around his fork. "Besides, it's fun to imagine. What would you wish for if it were real?" Mara tapped her chin, pretending to think hard. World peace? No, too cliché. $1 billion? Nah, too greedy." Her eyes twinkled with mischief. "I know. I'd wish for you to experience life as a girl. That'd teach you to leave the toilet seat up." They both burst into laughter, the idea so absurd it was hilarious. Luciano clutched his sides, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "Oh man, can you imagine? Me in heels and a dress? I'd be a disaster." As their laughter subsided, neither noticed the coin glowing faintly on the table. Mara wiped her eyes, still chuckling. "Well, it's a good thing it's just a regular old coin, right?" Luciano nodded, reaching for his glass of water. "Right. Just a silly story to—" His words cut off abruptly as a strange sensation washed over him. The room seemed to spin, colors blurring together in a dizzying kaleidoscope. Luciano gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. "Luciano, are you okay?" Mara's voice sounded distant, as if coming from underwater. He tried to respond, but no words came out. The strange feeling intensified, and Luciano felt as if his body was being unmade and remade, molecule by molecule. It wasn't painful, exactly, but the sensation was overwhelming. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Luciano blinked, the world coming back into focus. The first thing he noticed was Mara's face, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Luciano? She whispered, her voice trembling. He opened his mouth to ask what was wrong, but the voice that came out wasn't his own. It was higher, softer, decidedly feminine. What's happening? Hey, no, she asked, looking down at herself in growing panic. Where once there had been a middle-aged man in a button-up shirt and slacks, now sat a woman of similar age. Long chestnut hair tumbled over her shoulders, and the shirt that had fit perfectly moments ago now strained against a very different physique. Mara stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "Oh my God," she breathed, her hands covering her mouth. It worked! The coin, it actually worked! Luciano, or rather the woman who had been Luciano, stared at her hands, now smaller and more delicate. She touched her face, feeling the softer contours, the absence of stubble. This can't be real," she murmured, her new voice still foreign to her ears. Mara circled the table, approaching cautiously as if her husband-turned-wife might disappear at any moment. "I'm so sorry," she said, reaching out to touch Luciano's arm. "I didn't mean... I thought it was just a joke!" The reality of the situation began to sink in, and Luciano felt a wave of panic rising in her chest. She stood up abruptly, nearly losing her balance as she adjusted to her new center of gravity. "We have to fix this," she said, her voice taking on a hysterical edge. "There has to be a way to change me back." Mara nodded frantically, her eyes darting around the room before landing on the coin, still sitting innocently on the table. She snatched it up, turning it over in her hands. "Maybe if I wish again, or if you wish." Luciano grabbed the coin, closing her eyes tight. "I wish to be a man again," she said, her voice fervent with desperation. Nothing happened. She opened one eye, then the other, looking down at herself. Still female. "It's not working," she groaned, sinking back into her chair. "What are we going to do?" Mara paced the kitchen, running her hands through her hair. Okay, let's think this through. The coin only works once per person, right? That's what your friend said?" Luciano nodded miserably, still staring at her transformed body in disbelief. "So maybe we need to find someone else to make the wish, or track down your friend, see if he knows how to reverse it?" Mara suggested, trying to inject some hope into her voice. Luciano looked up, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Yes, that's it. We'll call him first thing in the morning. He has to know something." Mara nodded, then paused, a new thought occurring to her. "But what about tonight? And tomorrow? Luciano, you can't go to work like this. What will people think?" The reality of their situation crashed down on them both. This wasn't just a problem to be solved, it was a complete upheaval of their lives. I guess I'll have to call in sick," Luciano said, her voice small and uncertain. "But what do I do in the meantime? I don't even have any clothes that fit." Mara's eyes widened as she realized the practical implications of her husband's transformation. "Oh, right. Well, I suppose you could borrow some of mine for now. We're about the same size, I think." Luciano blanched at the thought of wearing women's clothing, but she knew she didn't have much choice. "This is insane," she muttered, burying her face in her hands. Mara moved closer, wrapping an arm around Luciano's shoulders. "We'll figure this out, I promise. For now, let's just take it one step at a time, okay?" Luciano nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Okay, one step at a time. First step, clothes that actually fit." Mara managed a small smile, trying to inject some levity into the situation. "Well, on the bright side, at least you won't have to shave your face anymore." Luciano let out a surprised laugh, the absurdity of it all finally hitting her. "I guess there's always a silver lining, huh?" As they made their way upstairs to find suitable clothing, Luciano couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this bizarre transformation had in store for her. One thing was certain: life as she knew it would never be the same again. In Mara's closet, Luciano stood awkwardly as her wife rummaged through hangers and drawers. The reality of her new body was becoming more apparent with each passing moment, and she couldn't help but feel a mix of fascination and discomfort. "Here," Mara said, holding out a pair of comfortable-looking pajamas. "These should work for tonight. We can figure out daytime clothes tomorrow." Luciano took the offered garments, her hands trembling slightly. "Thanks," she murmured, then hesitated. Could you maybe turn around?" Mara blinked, then nodded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Oh, right, of course." She turned to face the wall, giving Luciano some privacy. Changing clothes proved to be a challenge Luciano hadn't anticipated. Buttons that once fastened easily now strained against her new chest, and she fumbled with the unfamiliar clasps of the bra Mara had provided. After what felt like an eternity of awkward maneuvering, she finally managed to get dressed. "Okay, you can turn around now," Luciano said, her voice still strange to her own ears. Mara turned, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of her transformed spouse. The soft blue pajamas hung a bit loosely on Luciano's frame, but there was no mistaking the feminine curves beneath. "How do I look?" Luciano asked, attempting a weak smile. Mara stepped closer, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind Luciano's ear. "You look different, but still you, somehow." Luciano let out a shaky breath. "This is so weird, Mara. I don't know how to be this." She gestured at her new body, frustration evident in her voice. Mara took Luciano's hands in hers, squeezing gently. "Hey, it's okay. We'll figure this out together, all right? And hopefully it'll only be temporary." Luciano nodded, grateful for Mara's support. "What do we do now?" "Well, it's getting late. Why don't we try to get some sleep? Things might look clearer in the morning," Mara suggested. They made their way to the bedroom, the familiar space now feeling oddly alien to Luciano. As they settled into bed, she couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for her old self. "Mara," she whispered into the darkness. What if we can't change me back?" There was a moment of silence before Mara replied, her voice soft but firm. "Then we'll deal with it, together. I love you, Luciano, no matter what form you're in." Luciano felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. "I love you too," she murmured. As she drifted off to sleep, Luciano couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring challenges she'd never imagined facing. The next morning, Luciano awoke to the soft light filtering through the curtains. For a blissful moment, she forgot about the events of the previous night. Then, as consciousness fully took hold, the reality of her situation came crashing back. She sat up slowly, looking down at her transformed body with a mix of fascination and trepidation. It hadn't been a dream after all. Mara stirred beside her, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Morning," she mumbled, then seemed to remember the situation as her eyes widened. "Oh, how are you feeling?" Luciano ran a hand through her long hair, still marveling at the sensation. "Confused, scared. A little curious, if I'm being honest." Mara sat up, placing a comforting hand on Luciano's arm. "That's understandable. We'll get through this, okay?" Nodding, Luciano swung her legs over the side of the bed, pausing as she caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror across the room. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, yet oddly familiar. She had Luciano's eyes, the same nose, but softer features and a distinctly feminine build. "I guess we should start making some calls," Luciano said, tearing her gaze away from the mirror. "I need to let the shop know I won't be coming in, and we need to track down that friend who sold me the coin." Mara nodded, already reaching for her phone on the nightstand. "I'll call the bank and take a personal day. We need to focus on figuring this out." As Mara made her calls, Luciano gingerly made her way to the bathroom. Every Every movement felt different. Her center of gravity shifted, her body responding in unfamiliar ways. She splashed water on her face, then stared at her reflection in the mirror above the sink. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, trying to summon some courage. "It's just a body. You're still you inside." After finishing in the bathroom, Luciano returned to the bedroom to find Mara rifling through her closet. "Okay, I've got some options for you," Mara said, laying out several outfits on the bed. "I tried to pick things that would be comfortable and not too, well, feminine, if that makes sense." Luciano appreciated the thought, eyeing the clothes warily. There were a pair of jeans, a few loose-fitting tops, and a cardigan. No dresses or skirts in sight, thankfully. "Thanks," Luciano said, picking up the jeans. Could you maybe show me how to, you know?" She gestured vaguely at her chest, blushing furiously. Mara's eyes widened in understanding. "Oh, the bra, right, of course." She grabbed one from the drawer and demonstrated how to put it on, explaining the hooks and adjusting the straps. It took a few tries, but eventually Luciano managed to get dressed. The jeans hugged her, and the bra felt confining, but at least she looked presentable. "How do I look?" she asked, turning to Mara. Mara smiled softly. "You look nice. Different, but nice." Luciano attempted a smile in return, still feeling out of place in her own skin. "I guess we should come up with a name for me. You know, in case we need to introduce me to anyone while I'm like this." Mara thought for a moment. "How about Miranda?" "It's close to Luciano, and it means worthy of admiration, which you are for handling this so well." "Miranda," Luciano, now Miranda repeated, testing out the name. "I suppose that'll do." They made their way downstairs, the house feeling strangely different from Miranda's new perspective. In the kitchen, Mara busied herself making coffee while Miranda sat at the table, staring at the coin that had caused all this trouble. "Any luck reaching your friend?" Mara asked, setting a steaming mug in front of Miranda. Miranda shook her head. "No answer. I left a message, but who knows when he'll get back to me." She sighed, running a hand through her hair, a gesture that felt both familiar and foreign. "What do we do now?" Mara sat down across from her, cradling her own coffee mug. "Well, we can't just sit around waiting. Maybe we should, I don't know, try to make the best of this situation?" Miranda raised an eyebrow. "Make the best of it? Mara, I'm a woman. How am I supposed to just go about my life like this?" I know, Mara said, holding up a placating hand. "But we don't know how long this will last. It could be days, weeks. We need to be prepared for the possibility that this might not be a quick fix." The reality of Mara's words sank in, and Miranda felt a wave of panic rising in her chest. "Oh God, you're right. What about work? Our friends? Your parents are coming to visit next month." Mara reached across the table, taking Miranda's hand in hers. "Hey, breathe. We'll figure it out, okay? One step at a time." Miranda took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "Okay, one step at a time. What's the first step?" "Well," Mara said, a thoughtful look on her face, "I think we need to get you some essentials. Clothes that actually fit. Toiletries, you know, the basics." Miranda grimaced at the thought of shopping for women's clothes, but she knew Mara was right. "I guess that makes sense. But how do we explain me?" Mara considered this for a moment. "We could say you're my cousin, visiting from out of town. That would explain why you're staying with us and why no one's seen you before." "Your cousin," Miranda repeated, nodding slowly. "Okay, I think I can work with that. But what about my voice? It's different, but someone might recognize it. Just try to speak a little higher, maybe softer," Mara suggested. "And if anyone says you sound familiar, we can just say it runs in the family." Miranda practiced speaking in a slightly higher pitch, feeling ridiculous, but knowing it was necessary. After a few attempts, she managed to find a voice that sounded natural enough. "All right," Mara said, standing up. "Let's head to the mall. The sooner we get you set up with the basics, the better." As they got ready to leave, Miranda caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at her was still a stranger, but there was a determined glint in her eye that felt familiar. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection, squaring her shoulders. Mara appeared behind her, placing a reassuring hand on her back. "Ready?" Miranda nodded, taking a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." Together, they stepped out into the world, ready to face whatever challenges this new reality might bring. As they drove to the mall, Miranda couldn't help but wonder what other surprises awaited her in this unfamiliar life as a woman. The mall loomed before them, a sprawling complex of shops and bustling activity that suddenly seemed far more intimidating than it ever had before. Miranda hesitated as they approached the entrance, her steps faltering. Mara sensed her unease and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay. We'll take it slow, all right?" Miranda nodded, trying to summon her courage. "Right. Slow. We can do this." As they entered the mall, Miranda was immediately struck by how different everything felt from her new perspective. Scents from the perfume counter seemed more intense, the chatter of shoppers more distinct. She found herself noticing details she'd never paid attention to before. The cut of a blouse in a window display, the variety of shoes on offer. Their first stop was a department store. Mara led the way to the women's section, Miranda following close behind, feeling out of place and self-conscious. "Okay," Mara said, her voice low as they browsed through racks of clothing. "Let's start with the basics. Jeans, t-shirts, maybe a couple of blouses." Miranda nodded, her eyes wide as she took in the sheer variety of options before her. "How do you choose? There's so much." Mara smiled sympathetically. "It can be overwhelming at first. Here, let's start with jeans. What size are you wearing now?" After some trial and error in the fitting room, an experience Miranda found both awkward and enlightening, they managed to assemble a small wardrobe of essentials. Jeans, comfortable tops, a few sweaters, and even a simple dress that Mara insisted would be useful for any formal occasions. As they moved on to the lingerie section, Miranda felt her face flush with embarrassment. "Do we really need to do this?" she whispered to Mara. "Trust me, proper undergarments make a big difference," Mara replied, guiding her through the aisles. "You'll be much more comfortable." The process of selecting bras and underwear was a surreal experience for Miranda. She never imagined she'd be on this side of the equation, trying to determine her cup size and debating the merits of different styles. With their arms full of shopping bags, they made their way to the food court for a much-needed break. As they sat down with their trays, Miranda let out a long sigh. "You okay?" Mara asked, concern evident in her voice. Miranda nodded slowly. "Yeah, just processing. It's a lot to take in, you know?" "I can only imagine," Mara said softly. "You're doing great, though. Really." As they ate, Miranda found herself people-watching, observing the women around her with a new perspective. She noticed the way they moved, the subtle adjustments they made to their clothing, the different ways they interacted with others. "Mara," she said suddenly, her voice low, "how do you deal with attention? I've noticed people looking at me differently." Mara's expression softened with understanding. "Ah, yes. That's something you'll have to get used to, I'm afraid. Some of it is harmless, but—" She trailed off, then continued more firmly. "You have every right to set boundaries. If someone makes you uncomfortable, speak up or walk away." Miranda nodded, absorbing this new information. It was strange to think about navigating the world from this new social position. As they finished their meal, Mara's phone buzzed. She checked it, her eyes widening. "It's your friend, the one who sold you the coin. He's returning your call." Miranda's heart raced as Mara handed her the phone. Taking a deep breath, she answered, remembering to use her new, higher voice. "Hello? Luciano, is that you? You sound different," came the puzzled voice on the other end. "It's complicated," Miranda replied, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Listen, about that coin you sold me. We need to talk. It's important." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh no," the friend finally said, his voice filled with dawning realization. "It worked, didn't it? The coin actually worked." Miranda felt a mix of relief and frustration. Yes, it worked. And now I need to know how to undo it. Can we meet? They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe the next day. As Miranda hung up, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they were one step closer to reversing this bizarre transformation. "Well," Mara asked as Miranda set the phone down. "We're meeting him tomorrow," Miranda replied, a determined set to her jaw. Hopefully he'll have some answers. As they gathered their shopping bags and prepared to leave the mall, Miranda caught sight of her reflection in a store window. The woman looking back at her was still unfamiliar, but there was a new confidence in her stance, a hint of adaptation in her demeanor. "You know," she said to Mara as they walked to the car, "I think I might be getting the hang of this. A little bit, anyway." Mara smiled, linking her arm through Miranda's. "I knew you would. You've always been adaptable. It's one of the things I love about you." As they drove home, Miranda found herself wondering what other discoveries awaited her in this new life. The journey was far from over, but for the first time since her transformation, she felt a spark of curiosity alongside her apprehension. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also the possibility of answers and perhaps a way back to her old self. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling within Miranda. She stood in front of the mirror, carefully applying the minimal makeup Mara had shown her how to use. It felt strange, this new ritual, but she had to admit it helped her feel more put together in her unfamiliar body. "You ready?" Mara called from downstairs. Miranda took a deep breath, smoothing down the simple blouse she'd chosen. "Coming?" she replied, her voice still higher than she was used to. They drove to the cafe in relative silence, both lost in thought about what this meeting might reveal. As they pulled into the parking lot, Miranda spotted her friend Thomas sitting at an outdoor table, nervously fidgeting with a napkin. "There he is," Miranda said, her heart rate picking up. "God, this is going to be awkward," Mara squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It'll be fine. Just remember, he's the one who got you into this mess. If anyone should be uncomfortable, it's him." They approached the table and Thomas looked up, his eyes widening as he took in Miranda's transformed appearance. Luciano?" he stammered, standing up awkwardly. "Is that really you?" Miranda nodded, trying to maintain her composure. "It's Miranda now, at least for the time being. This is my wife, Mara." They sat down, an uncomfortable silence settling over the table. Thomas kept glancing between Miranda and Mara, his expression a mix of fascination and guilt. "I'm so sorry," he finally blurted out. "I never thought... the stories about the coin had been in my family for generations, but I never actually believed they were true." "Well, they are," Miranda said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. "And now I need to know how to change back." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, his expression pained. "That's the thing. I'm not sure you can." Miranda felt as if the ground had dropped out from under her. "What do you mean you're not sure? There has to be a way." "The stories in my family, they never mentioned anyone changing back," Thomas explained, his voice apologetic. "The coin grants one wish per person, and that's it. It's permanent." Mara leaned forward, her eyes flashing with determination. "There has to be something. Some loophole, some way to reverse it. Think, Thomas. Was there anything else in those stories?" Thomas furrowed his brow, clearly racking his brain for any scrap of information. "Well, there was one story. It was vague, more of a rumor, really. Something about the original creator of the coin." "Go on," Miranda urged, clinging to this thread of hope. "The story goes that the creator was a powerful sorcerer who lived centuries ago. He made the coin as a way to teach people to be careful what they wish for," Thomas continued. "Supposedly, he hid away his grimoire, his book of spells, which might contain information about the coin's magic." Miranda and Mara exchanged glances. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Do you have any idea where this grimoire might be?" Mara asked. Thomas shook his head. "No, but I might know someone who could help. My grandmother. She's the one who passed down all these stories. If anyone knows more about the coin's history, it's her." Miranda felt a glimmer of hope. "Can you take us to her?" Thomas nodded. "She lives a few hours away in a small town up north. I can call her and see if we can visit." As Thomas stepped away to make the call, Miranda turned to Mara, her expression a mix of hope and trepidation. "What do you think? Should we pursue this?" Mara took Miranda's hand, squeezing it gently. "I think it's worth a shot. Even if it's a long shot, we have to try." Thomas returned, a small smile on his face. "Good news. Grandma said we're welcome to visit. She seemed intrigued when I mentioned the coin." They made plans to leave for Thomas's grandmother's house the next morning. As they said their goodbyes, Miranda felt a strange mix of emotions: hope for a possible solution, anxiety about what they might discover, and a growing sense of surreality about her entire situation. That night, as Miranda lay in bed next to Mara, she found herself reflecting on the past few days. Despite the shock and discomfort, she had to admit there had been moments of fascination, even enjoyment, in experiencing life from this new perspective. "Mara?" she whispered into the darkness. What if we can't change me back?" Miranda asked, voicing the fear that had been lurking in the back of her mind. Mara rolled over to face her, reaching out to stroke her cheek. "Then we'll figure it out together. I meant what I said before. I love you, no matter what form you're in." Miranda felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of Mara's love and acceptance. "I love you too," she murmured. As she drifted off to sleep, Miranda couldn't help but wonder what the next day would bring. Would they find answers in the old stories of Thomas's grandmother? Or would she have to come to terms with this new life permanently? Whatever happened, she knew one thing for certain. With Mara by her side, she could face anything. The alarm blared at an ungodly hour, jolting Miranda from a fitful sleep. For a moment, she forgot about her transformation, reaching out with a groan to silence the noise. Then, as consciousness fully took hold, reality came rushing back. "Rise and shine," Mara mumbled from beside her, already sitting up and stretching. "We've got a long drive ahead of us." Miranda nodded, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and paused, still not used to the reflection staring back at her. Long chestnut hair tousled from sleep, soft curves where there used to be angles. It was like looking at a stranger who wore her expressions. "You okay?" Mara asked, noticing Miranda's hesitation. "Yeah," Miranda replied, shaking herself out of her reverie. "Just still getting used to this, I guess." They got ready in comfortable silence, the routine they'd established over the past few days feeling almost normal now. Miranda found herself moving with more confidence as she dressed, no longer fumbling with clasps and zippers as she had at first. As they loaded their overnight bags into the car, Thomas pulled up in his beat-up sedan. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his keys as he approached. "Morning," he said, his voice slightly strained. "You guys ready for this?" Miranda nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "As ready as we'll ever be. Let's go meet your grandmother." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.